Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Tharshey and welcome to the ultimate faction guide for Total War Attila. In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to master and play every single faction in the game. So I'm going to go through each faction one by one. I'm going to first go through the unit roster for the faction, then I will go through their strengths, their weaknesses, and finally I will end with a army example that you can take into multiplayer battles. All armies will assume 1, 2, 4 rules, which basically means 1 RT, 2 pikes, and 4 skirmishes. If you see the army but you cannot afford it because you are playing on different level of funds, just swap out more expensive units for cheaper versions of the same unit. Anyways, if you guys do enjoy the video, please do drop a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on post notifications. Anyways, let's get straight into it. Okay guys, so the first faction we're going to be taking a look at is Aksum. Aksum have a very diverse roster. They have good options for their general. They have solid spear infantry. They have amazing melee infantry with the Behest Chosen. They have some really good axes with the Spice Guard. Unfortunately, they are lacking in bow options as they only have elite Nubian archers as their best bow options. They do have access to slingers, but you probably are not going to take them, and they unfortunately lack any crossbow options. In terms of cavalry, they have a very nice solid lineup of melee cavalry with both horse and camel options. Shock cavalry, they are lacking with only one option, which is your camel lancers. They do, however, have access to bow cav, which is very nice to have, as well as some skirmisher cav. Then they also have access to warhounds, and unlike most dog units in the game, these are actually ranged, they are not spears. Unfortunately, they do lack heavy artillery and only have access to a light onager. So for the strengths of this faction, they excel with their infantry. They have amazing spears, amazing melee inf, and absolutely devastating axes. Their weaknesses, unfortunately, is their lack of better archers and crossbows, but they do have very mobile archers if you are taking skirmisher cav, bow cav, or warhounds. They unfortunately lack good shock cap, but they have a nice amount of melee options. Now, for an example army, you're going to take some Desert Warlords, you're going to take Spears, you can take 2 to 4 units of that, depends. Some Behest Chosen, you're going to take a lot of Spice Guard, because Spice Guard are going to be your go-to unit. Now, assuming 1, 2, 4 rules, you're only allowed maximum of 4 archers. So we're going to take 4 elite Nubian archers. However, you can swap these out for slingers, for bow cav, or skirmisher cav, or warhounds, depending on what you want. For your cav, you're probably going to just want to take 2 units of Kushite Mounted Shotalai, though you can obviously drop it and take some camels instead if you prefer. Your final unit will be your artillery. Now, I have 2 units extra. What you can do is, if you're defending, take some extra spears or some extra chosen. Otherwise, you're just going to fill that up with Spice Guard. Next up, we're going to move over to the Alamans. So the Alamans have 3 general options as well, 1 cav and 2 melee. They have a good amount of spear infantry, as you can see. They have pikes, though unfortunately these are the cheapest Germanic pikes, so they don't have great pikes, but they do have access to pikes. Their melee infantry is a bit lacking, but they do have some decent top tier melee infantry. They have access to axes, not the best axes, but they're good enough for what they are. As for bow infantry, they have access to some nice elite Germanic archers, and they also have access to crossbows as well as slingers. They do have 1 skirmisher option, but they are lacking a little in their cav. So there are 4 options for melee cav, only 1 for your shock cav, so you don't have the biggest variety, but they do have really nice skirmisher cav, as well as heavy artillery and even the option to take out a scorpion. So your army is going to look something like this. You're going to take the best general, the cav general. You're going to take some spear masters, 2 to 4 units depending. You're going to take 2 units of pikes, as this is 1, 2, 4 rules. Then your main army is going to be made up of the melee infantry as well as axes. So we're going to take some of the melee inf, maybe 2 units of Germanic warband. You're going to take 4 units of the archers. If you are defending, you probably are going to want to swap out these archers for crossbows, but in this case we're just going to go with elite Germanic archers. Now for your cavalry, you have a few options. You can get some Germanic lancers, and it's very nice to have shock cav, so I will take a unit of shock cav, I will take 2 units of melee cav, and we will go for a large onager. If you are defending, you can switch out, or even if you are attacking, you can switch out the large onager for a scorpion. It is up to you. For your final unit, you can either get an extra unit of shock or melee cavalry, or if you want, you can take a 3rd unit of axes. Next up, we're going to go over to the Alans, the Alani as I call them. So the Alans have a amazing roster. As you can see, so general wise they only have 2 options, but that's okay. Melee infantry, they have really good choices, ending up with these elite Agastari warriors. Now where the Alan shine is cavalry. So as you can see, They lack any sort of spears, they lack axes, and they have no bows, crossbows, or skirmishers. They have absolutely no infantry variants of any of that. However, they make up for it with an absolutely massive cav roster. So for melee cav, they have cav ranging from 400 all the way up to 1150. For shock cav, they have 400 again all the way up to 1200. And they have bow cavalry from 450 to 850. So even though they lack any sort of melee infantry in terms of archers and crossbows and slingers, they make up for it with a good selection of bow cavalry as well as really nice skirmisher cav. They do also have access to warhounds, which are nice, and these are spears, but they lack heavy artillery. So an example army for the Alamans, whether you're attacking or defending, it's pretty much going to be the same. You're going to have to go very cav heavy, but you're going to take a couple units of these elite Agastari warriors as they're really good. Now for your melee cav, these are going to be your bread and butter. You're going to take like 6 units of them. You're going to take a couple units of shock cav to deal damage and hit the enemy where you can. You're going to get your 4 units of bows, and then you're going to have a unit of arty, and you can take some warhounds. Now the way you will change this army composition up is you can drop a unit of shock cav, take an extra unit of warhounds, and you can drop out melee cavalry for shock cavalry depending on whether you're attacking or defending. Next up, we're going to go over to the Anteans. Now the Anteans have a very specific army comp. So they have one general option only. They have decent spear options and decent melee options as well as good axes. However, they shine in the bow department. They have absolutely amazing poison hunters. Skirmishers, they also have a good amount of options both in melee infantry as well as cavalry. So they have skirmisher cav as well as infantry skirmishers. However, they lack any sort of shock cavalry, they lack any sort of melee cavalry or bow cavalry, and they do not have access to any heavy artillery. So what you're going to want to do when you're building them is get a decent amount of shields. Whether you want 2 or 4, it's up to you. You can get some melee infantry. Perrin's champions are solid. You're also going to want to take some axes, so some of Perrin's axes, and then you're going to want to grab 4 units of poison hunters. Now this is not debatable, okay? You do not switch out these poison hunters for anything else. The rest of these archer and skirmisher options you do not touch. Now I would like to have some cavalry, and you can take 2 units of cav like this. However, if you are playing multiplayer and it's 1-2-4 rules, these 4 units of archers are going to be your 4 skirmishers, so you cannot then go and add on these raiders. So that is fine, you're just not going to take any cav. Instead, you'll just finish the army up with some extra infantry. So your bread and butter of this army is these poison archers, as they're really, really powerful. Next up, we're going to go over to the Burgundians. So the Burgundians have 3 general options as well. Very solid general with your Royal Burgundian General, as well as 2 nice infantry generals. Now for their spears, they lack a little bit of options, but they have 3 decent options, so it's good enough. For their pikes, they have nice pikes. I mean, they're the cheapest pikes, but at least they have access to pikes. Melee infantry are sorely lacking, and you pretty much are never going to use these, unfortunately, but they make up for that with really good axes. In terms of range, they have solid elite Germanic archers, and they have good crossbows. They also have some of the best slingers in the game with these elite scattershot slingers. So these are slingers with a shield, and they have actual decent melee stats as well as nice missile stats. So these are actually an option over here. They have good skirmishers as well, with cheap and expensive options, and they have some decent cavalry. They have a couple options for melee cav, as you can see. They have quite a few shock cav options as well, and they even have access to a few skirmisher cav as well as warhounds. In terms of artillery, they do get access to the large onager. For an example army, you're going to go with Royal Burgundian General, you're going to go with some Germanic Spearmasters, 2 units of pikes. You're going to just leave out these noble Germanic swords, okay? It's not worth it. If you want to take it, you'd probably rather go for some Germanic warband. If you want, use it and cycle, or if you just want for the wars, you can take 2 units of Germanic swords, but I wouldn't take any more. Instead, your main infantry unit will be these axemen. So we're going to fill this army up with a lot of axes. Now for your archers, you're going to go with 4 elite Germanic archers. However, if you are defending, you can swap these out for the crossbows, or you can swap these out for these elite scattershot slingers. Okay, it is up to you whether you want to take archers, slingers, or crossbows, and you will have to just decide depending on whether you're attacking or defending a settlement, or if you're fighting a field battle. Now we cannot take any skirmishers since we already have our max skirmisher cap. Instead, we're going to take some melee cavalry over here, and you can also take some shock cav, or you can do that and take the artillery. So that's just depending on you, but the army will look something like this. Next up, we're going to go over to the Caledonians. So the Caledonians have quite a few general options. They have melee infantry as well as bows. This is one of the few factions that have bows as general. Spears, they have quite a few options as well, pretty varied from cheap to expensive spears. Melee infantry, they have a lot of options, however, they're all very cheap. So none of them are very good, okay? So they have like 7 options, but these are not going to be the bread and butter. Instead, your bread and butter of your army is going to be your axe infantry, which are going to just outshine what your melee infantry are able to do. Now, in terms of range, you have pretty solid elite Highland archers. You unfortunately only get very cheap Celtic crossbows. I wouldn't really bother using them unless you just have no money for anything else. You also do have decent options for skirmishes, but once again, you probably just want to go with your elite Highland archers. For cavalry, you are lacking, unfortunately, in options. You only have 1 melee cav option. You do not have any shock cav, and you do have decent skirmisher options, but again, you're probably going to want to go with some elite Highland archers instead. You do get a good amount of warhounds here, so you actually have 3 options for your warhounds, but you are lacking in heavy artillery. So an example army would look something like this. So assuming that your 4 skirmishers will include your general, you are going to want to go for a melee general instead. You're going to want to get a couple spears to hold the line, because remember, you're not going to really be using much of your melee infantry. They're just not going to do that much damage, but you can take them as they do have excellent capture power, and you can use them to cap towers and control points really quick. Now you're going to grab a good couple units of axes, as your axes are once again going to be the bread and butter of your army. You're going to take 4 units of your elite Highland archers. I wouldn't really recommend taking these crossbows or skirmishers. You are going to take cav. Even though you don't have the greatest cav options, you do need to have some cav, so you are going to take a few of that, and you're going to take some warhounds along with your arty. Once again, if you are not taking artillery, you can swap this out for another unit of cav or warhounds. That is completely up to you. Next up, we're going to go over to the Danes. So the Danes have a pretty nice roster. They have some very solid general options. They have quite a few spears as well, and they do have access to pikes. Once again, so far, all these factions only have the most basic of pike units. However, pikes are pikes and are still going to do great if used correctly, so it's always worth taking them. In terms of melee infantry, you have a very nice roster, all the way from these cheap 100 gold Nordic band to these 725 gold chosen warriors. You have amazing axes as well with the Viking raiders, but you are lacking in ranged options. So you unfortunately do not have great bows. You only have Nordic bows or Nordic colors for infantry and slingers, and you lack any sort of crossbows. You do have decent skirmisher options, and this is one of the few factions where you may want to go for skirmishers over bows or slingers of any sort. You have a couple melee cav options, which is nice to see, and you do have 1 skirmisher cav, which is pretty decent. You also have warhounds. Unfortunately, these are very cheap warhounds and are not very good, but you do have access to a large onager. So what is your army going to look like? Well, it's going to be very melee based, very heavy on the infantry, as those are some of your best units. So you're going to go with a lot of chosen warriors, as these guys are absolutely amazing, as well as a bunch of Viking raiders. Now for your archers, once again, you can take Nordic bows or slingers, or you could just go for javies. Again, this is going to limit your range, so you may want to still take a unit of bows or 2 to fire back at enemy skirmishes, but for this video, we're going to be taking 4 units of these Nordic javies instead. You're going to take some melee cav as well, and you're going to go for the arty. You're not really going to want to touch your warhounds, but you can take skirmisher cav here, guys. So if you don't want to take Nordic javies, but you want some mounted skirmishes instead, so you can have the speed and the agility to go and take out your enemy's range, then you can swap out these javies for your Nordic raiders instead. Next up, we're going to go to the Eastern Roman Empire. So the Eastern Roman Empire have an amazing roster. They have 3 really good general options, 2 cav, 1 infantry. They have the solid spear line. They have good pikes, so these are it's only 1 option, but these are very solid pikes with some actual armor and defense. Their melee infantry is lacking a little bit, so they do have quite a few options for melee infantry. However, they do not have the best melee infantry. There's a lot of barbarian factions and stuff out there that have way better. Where they shine, however, is the Hatarier Guard. The Hatarier Guard are some of the best axes in the game, so you're going to rely pretty heavily on these for all your melee action. In terms of bows, you have decent options as well. You have the Armored Sagittari. They are pretty solid bows, but you also have access to Elite Ballistari, which you will take in any defensive scenario, though you may want to take some Sagittari if you are attacking. In terms of skirmishes, You have Jabbies, these are very cheap, not worth it, and you only have the most basic of Slingers, so also not worth it. Cavalry wise, you are doing quite well. You have a lot of melee options, you have good shock options, and you do have access to bow cav. So you may want to swap out a couple of your bows for bow cav if it's needed, especially in a field battle. You also have access to really good skirmisher cav with the Imperial Dromedari. You have access to a large onager as well as scorpions. So an army for you can look something like this. Couple units of spears, couple units of pikes, once again max of 2 pikes. Now, for your melee infantry, if you're holding a wall or you just don't need throwables, you are going to go for Numeroi. Otherwise, it's better to go for the Eastern Armored Legio. The difference in stats is very minimal, and these guys do have a missile weapon, and you're going to be able to do a lot better with that. We're going to go over some Hatari Guard, and we're actually going to probably reduce the amount of Legio we take, as we don't really need that much. Now, for your bows, I am going to take the Elite Ballistari, assuming we're defending. If we're attacking, we can swap out 2 units of these for Armored Sagittari or for the Missile Cavalry instead. For your cav options, you are very solid. You have Tagmata cav, we're going to take 1 unit of that, and we're going to take some Plebonari as well as a large onager. Remember, this is an example army, and you can switch this up depending on your situation. If you are attacking, you may want some more armored infantry instead of Hatari Guard, as well as some bows. But if you are defending, you may want to swap out this for maybe more Hatari, keep your crossbows here, or even take a Scorpion. Next up, we're going to go over to the Ebdanians. So the Ebdanians have 3 solid general options as well. That's going to be your general. It's very solid. Your spear infantry is not the best. You do have a couple options, but honestly they're not the best. You're only going to use them if you want to just try and hold the line somewhere. You do have quite a few melee infantry options, and they are pretty solid with your King's Warband. You have solid axes as well. You have a couple cheaper options, and you have the nicer Celtic Axe warriors. In terms of your bows and your range, you are lacking a bit. So bow infantry, you only have access to cheap bows and cheap crossbows. However, they excel with skirmishes. As you can see, you have all the way up to the Rigdamna. I can never pronounce this unit, guys. I'm sorry, but yeah, you have very versatile skirmishes, all the way from the 375 gold Celtic Brigands to the 950 gold these guys. In terms of your cavalry, once again, you are lacking. You only have 1 option for melee cav. You lack any sort of skirmisher cav, shock cav, but you have a lot of skirmisher cav, with your chosen raiders being your best, and you have some pretty decent Warhound options, with the Wolfhound Spearmen being your top. Unfortunately, you once again do lack heavy artillery. So for an example army, we're not going to want to take too many spears. In fact, you may not want to take any at all. It's up to you, but for this scenario, we'll take 2 units, just because spears are decent to have. We're going to take some good melee infantry as well as some good axes. Bows, we're honestly just going to leave it out and go for these skirmishes. These Jabbies are amazing. They do a lot of damage, and they have quite a lot of ammunition as well. However, if you are attacking or you do need some ranged options to deal with enemy bows, then you could swap out a unit or 2 for some Celtic archers instead. Melee cav, you do need some. Unfortunately, you don't have the best options, but we're going to take 2 units of that. Again, for skirmishes, if you're on a field battle or you do need your skirmishes to have agility and mobility as well as speed, then you can swap out some skirmishes for some cav skirmishes instead. You're going to take 2 units of Warhounds. These Warhounds are really nice if you use them well, and we're going to use D1 artillery. Next up, we're going to go over to the Franks. So the Franks have a pretty good roster. They have 2 options only for the general, but they do have solid spear options, from Germanic Levy to Germanic Spearmasters. They have access to pikes, which are nice, even though these are the cheapest of pikes, but they have amazing melee infantry. So you have $100 or 100 gold Bagudai, but your top tier infantry are the Royal Astrotones. These guys are amazing. They have shields, they have good defense, they have armor, and they are just going to do a lot of damage in a fight. You also have a very diverse axe roster with 4 options to pick from, with your Francisca Herban being absolutely amazing axes. In terms of bows, you have very good ranged options as well, with Elite Germanic Archers being your top bows. You have the Germanic crossbows, which are good crossbows to use, especially if you are defending. You may want to take them. And you have access to slingers, but once again, you are probably not going to be using these. You have some decent skirmishes with Frankish skirmishes, but again, you probably are going to want your Elite Germanic Archers over them, unless you are taking these to use close range, maybe if you're attacking in a siege battle, etc. You have good cav options. So you have 4 options for melee cav. Noble Germanic Horsemen are amazing. You have a lot of shock cavalry options, which is really nice to see. with your best being the Sacra Francisca, and you also have some skirmisher cav options. You can take these, but once again, remember, if you take skirmisher cav, it is going to reduce the amount of elite Germanic archers or crossbows that you can bring, and they have access to large onagers. So an example army would look something like this. We're going to take 2 units of spears, 2 units of pikes, and we're going to take a lot of infantry and axes, okay, because these guys are your bread and butter. So we're going to take Francisca Herban as well as a lot of Royal Estratones. For your army, we're going to take elite Germanic archers, but again, you're going to want to swap these out if you are defending, and you can instead take some Germanic crossbows. For your cav, we're going to go for a unit of melee and a unit of shock cav as well as an arty. This army, once again, can be changed. You can reduce the infantry, take some more cavalry if you're on a field battle, or swap out the archers for crossbows if you're defending. Next up, we're going to go over to the Garamantians. Garamantians have 2 general options, both are mounted. You have quite a good spear line, so you have Desert Levy all the way up to the Shawia Guard, which are pretty solid. You have nice melee infantry options, but again, these are pretty cheap, so it's a bit lacking, but you make up for that with your cav. So in terms of archers, you lack any sort of crossbows, unfortunately. No crossbows, no armor piercing. You do have access to slingers and 2 units of bow infantry. Desert Bowmen are useless, and your Garamantian Hunters are basically going to be your go-to unit if you're not bringing Skirmisher Cav. In terms of cavalry though, you have a lot of options. You have melee cav, a lot of it which is camels and are pretty solid. You have some really nice shock cavalry as well with your Lances of the Oasis. You have good Skirmisher Cav options as well with your Noble Numidian Cavalry, and these could be used to swap out for your Garamantian Hunters, especially if you're playing a field battle. They unfortunately lack any sort of heavy artillery and only get a light onager. So for your army, you're going to be relying more on your spears, because these infantry, they're good, but they're just not the greatest. So you're going to take more spears than you would in most other armies. Get some Palatina Defectors. We're going to take 4 units of archers. Once again, you can swap these out for cav if needed. Now, more of your army is actually going to be cav, because you have pretty decent cav over here. You're going to get some shock cav as well, and your army will look something like this. Once again, you can adapt this depending on whether you're fighting a siege battle or field battle, and whether you're attacking or defending. Next up, we're going to go over to the Geats. So the Geats have nice general options, with your Viking captain being your best. You have a lot of spear options, so you have 275 gold spear levy all the way up to 650 gold Nordic spear masters. You do have access to pikes, which are always nice to have, and you have really good melee infantry, with your chosen warriors being your best. Once again, you have amazing axes. Viking raiders are going to be your bread and butter. Now for your bows, you are again lacking. You have very cheap bows, very cheap slingers, no access to better bows or crossbows at all. However, as with a lot of these Viking style factions, you get good skirmishers, so you do have Nordic javelinmen. In terms of cav, you are lacking once again. No shock cavalry, 1 pretty decent skirmisher cav option, and you have decent enough melee cav. You do have access to warhounds, but again, these are very terrible warhounds, and you're probably not going to want to use them, but they do have access to a large RT at least. So in terms of your army, you're going to build it very melee heavy. You're going to want to take a lot of spearmasters, you're going to take some pikes, and you're going to go for a lot of chosen warriors as well as a lot of axes. So these guys are going to just go in and do all your damage. Now in terms of your archers, once again, I'm going to go with skirmishers instead. I don't think it's worth going for your bows or your slingers, but you can swap them in if needed. This is a melee only army, so if you need some cav, especially if you're attacking or playing in a field battle, you can swap out some spears for some Viking raider cavalry, but that again is up to you. Next up, we're going to go over to the Himyar. So Himyar have pretty solid roster. They have a couple good options for generals. They have 2 cav generals, 1 infantry general. They have okay spears. Unfortunately, these aren't very good, but they are decent enough at holding the line, but you can take a couple of units off it. Next up, you have your melee infantry. So the Himyar luckily have very nice infantry options, from all the way from your desert tribesmen to your Kushite Chotalai, and they have really nice axes with these Belta defenders. In terms of range, you are lacking any sort of crossbows, but you have decent bow infantry with your elite Nubian archers, and if you go down to skirmishes, you have these really amazing Rumhar warriors, which have a lot of ammo, brilliant javies, and can do a lot of damage even in melee if needed. Now, where the Himyar shine are obviously going to be their cav. They have a lot of melee cav options with your armored Himyarite Shotalai at the top. These are camels, so you have camel and horse options. For short cavalry, you only have 2 options, but honestly, you're only really going to want to take the Almakar Lancers. These guys are amazing. You do have access to bow cavalry, so even though you don't have the greatest bow infantry, you can take bow cav. These guys are pretty solid, and obviously you have the mobility and the speed of a cav unit being your mounted unit, being your ranged unit, sorry. Now you have decent skirmish options as well, but you're probably just going to want to go for your Zodiac Archers over any skirmisher cav. They unfortunately do not have access to any heavy arty. Now for an example army, as you can see, we already got a couple spears there, but you don't really need any more, as they are not really the best stuff. Instead, you're going to go a lot more in on your melee infantry and your axe infantry. For your bows, you can either go for some elite Nubian archers, for some Rumhar warriors, or you can go for the bow cav. So for this, we're just going to go 2 bow cav and 2 skirmishers, but you can swap this out as needed and pick whichever 4 ranged options you prefer. You're going to go for some melee cav. These are very nice. You're also going to go for some lancers, and that's going to be pretty much what your army is going to look like. Next up, we're going to go over to the Huns. So the Huns are obviously very, very powerful cav faction. They are in a similar boat to the Alani, though they do have a bit more melee troops compared to the Alans, who only have infantry. For your options, for your general, you have 3 amazing cav generals, including the Hunnic warlords, which are absolutely deadly. You have good spear options as well, with the Screer warriors being pretty solid spears, and they can definitely help you hold the line. For your melee infantry, you have amazing chosen Uar warriors at the top, so they are not lacking with bad infantry. The Huns actually have really good infantry as well. They have some axe options, but you're probably not going to want to go for these over the chosen Uar warriors, as they're just better, and they're just going to perform a lot better than these axes. For your bows, you have very good bow infantry for a cav heavy faction, so you do have Uar archers that you can take. However, there's no point taking them because you just have way better cavalry options. As you can see by this cav roster, it's absolutely massive. You have so many melee cav options. You can pick absolutely anything you want. Obviously, we're going to be going for knockers mostly. For your shock cavalry, you have amazing shock cav, all the way from your cheap step lancers all the way to your first wave lancers. And as I said, there's no reason to take these bow infantry because you have amazing bow cavalry, okay? These guys are going to hold you. They're going to hold your hand and take you through all your battles, and you're going to do amazing with that. As for artillery, you do have access to large onagers. Now for your army, what are you going to want to do? You're going to want to take a couple spears, a couple chosen war warriors, but honestly you don't really need much else in terms of infantry. Your army is going to be mostly cav based. You're going to take a lot of knockers, you're going to take a lot of first wave lancers, and you're going to take all 4 units of bows, being bow cavalry. If you really want some melee, some infantry bows, you can take some Uar archers, but I honestly don't see a reason to do that. It's better to just max out your army with full cav, as they're pretty amazing. So yeah, let's do that. Maybe a little bit more melee, and that's pretty much what your army is going to be like. Very heavy on the cavalry, not too much of infantry, though if you're attacking a settlement or defending a settlement, you can swap out some cavalry for some infantry. But again, there's obviously much better factions to play than the Huns in a siege. Next up, we have the Jutes. So the Jutes have very solid options as well. They've got some nice general options. They have some decent spears as well, with your Nordic Spearmasters being pretty solid. They have access to pikes, which is very nice to have, and they have the Chosen Warriors once again for their melee infantry. In terms of axes though, they shine. They have the Royal Huskars. While other Viking factions only have Raiders, the Jutes have the Royal Huskars, which are absolutely amazing. These guys are going to cut through your enemies like a hot knife through butter. Unfortunately, the Jutes do lack in range. They have very bad bow infantry, very bad slingers, but they make up for it a little bit in some decent skirmishes with your Nordic Javelinmen. In terms of your cav options, you're once again limited, with only a couple options for melee cav and absolutely no shock cavalry. You do have a decent skirmisher cav, but again, you probably want to go for infantry units of that unless you are in a field battle or you just need the mobility and speed. They have access to warhounds, but these warhounds are honestly not very good and not worth taking, and they do have a large artillery. So in terms of your army, you're going to want to do something like this. Get a couple Spearmasters, get a couple Pikes, because it's always worth taking those 2 units of Pikes. They can hold a choke point really well. You're going to go for a couple units of Chosen Warriors, but your bread and butter, once again, are going to be these Chosen Huskars. These Royal Huskars. They're amazing. They're going to absolutely outshine everything else in your army, and there's no reason not to take them. Skirmishers, we're going to take 2 units of the skirmishers over there, but we're also going to take 2 units of the skirmisher cab, just because because I can. But you guys can obviously switch those out. You know, if you don't want to take full skirmishes, you can go and take a couple bows. It is up to you. Now for your cavalry, you're going to just take 2 units of Viking Raider cav. They're pretty solid melee cav, and it's good to have some cav against your enemies. Next up, we have the Lakhmids. Lakhmids have some pretty nice generals, with King's Redif being your best bet. You have okay spears once again, with unfortunately your best spears being the desert spears, but you do have really solid melee infantry. You have access to the Kushite Shotalai. Bows are actually really good. So while most factions that come from the deserts and the sands only have access to elite Nubian archers, the Lakhmids do have the Kurdish archers. These guys are really good, and you're going to want to take 4 units of it. There's no other way around it. They do have solid slingers, but don't take Armenian slingers when you can take Kurdish archers. You know, and even if you're not taking Kurdish archers due to funds, well, honestly, you should still be taking them. You should drop your cost in terms of your cavalry or your melee infantry instead. In terms of your cav options, you have very solid cav options. You have a lot of melee cav options. Most of your best options are going to be these Al-Shabaab and the Kushite Mounted Shotalai, but you do have a camel option if you want it as well. Next up, for your shock cavalry, you have decent options. You have the cheaper camel lances and the much better Wadar. Yeah, it's worth using them because they're pretty solid, and shock cab in Attila obviously does so much of damage. You do have access to 2 units of skirmisher cab, so you can take them if you really want, but it's probably better to just go with your Kurdish archers, and unfortunately you lack any sort of large artillery. Now for your example army, you're going to take a couple spears, you're going to take a lot of these Kushite Shotalai, as these guys are going to be your main infantry unit. Now we already picked our bows, and we're not going to bother with slingers. Now for your cab, you're going to take a couple of these Al-Shabaab as your melee cab, and you're going to take a couple of the shock cab. Now for your last 2 slots, depending on what it is, if it's a field battle, you probably go for some more Al-Shabaab and some more Wadar. If it's a siege battle, you probably want to go for 2 more units of Kushite Shotalai. So for now, we'll just do that. Again, you can switch this out and change it depending on the type of battle you are fighting. Next up, we have the Langobards. So the Langobards have a very, very nice roster. Langobards have amazing generals with your Godan's Warlord. They have good spear options with your Germanic Spearmasters. They have amazing melee infantry as well, with your Godan's Chosen being really great. And a special thing that the Langobards do is a lot of the units have Berserk, which means the unit will just go Berserk and kill everything, okay? It's amazing. They will, instead of breaking, they go Berserk. I mean, they can still break, but you know, going Berserk can be very helpful at times. It can be very annoying at times because you cannot order your unit once it's gone Berserk. You do have access to some axes, but why pick Germanic Warband when you have Godan's Chosen? You're probably always going to want to go for the Godan's Chosen instead, unless funds are limiting you. In terms of your bow infantry, you have access to the elite Germanic archers. These guys are going to be your go-to, especially for a field battle or if you're attacking a settlement. If you are defending a settlement, however, you can switch it out for some crossbow infantry, but most cases you're just going to be taking the archers. You do have access to some cheap slingers and skirmishers, but again, they're not worth taking, they're just not very good. Over at your melee cab, you have quite a few options at least, so that's pretty nice. You're going to want to take some noble Germanic horsemen probably. In terms of shock cab, you only have Germanic lances. They're pretty cheap, but they can still be pretty effective if used correctly, and you do have access to some decent skirmisher options with your Germanic Knight Raiders. Also, the Langobards do have access to a large onager, which once again is very nice to see. So an example army is going to be something like this. You're not going to take too many spears, you're going to take a lot of Godan's Chosen, okay? These guys are amazing, they're going to do so much damage. Honestly, there's no point taking this. Look at the stat difference, there's no point taking any warband at all. Over at your cab, going to go for 2 units of the noble Germanic horses. You're going to take 1 unit of shock cab just because it's always nice to have some shock cab. Now for the rest of your army, once again, you can take some more spears if needed. needed, especially if you're defending a settlement. You may want to go for a few more spears. Otherwise, you're just going to want to max out your army on Gaudan's Chosen. So for us, we're going to take an extra unit of that, extra unit of Gaudan's Chosen. You can take axes if you are, lacking funds for a full army of Gaudan's Chosen, but again, these are your bread and butter units. Next up, we have the Ostrogothic Kingdom. So the Ostrogothic Kingdom and the Ostrogoths themselves have pretty similar rosters. Both are very good, but I think the base Ostrogoths do have a better roster. But for the Ostrogothic Kingdom, you have one general option, the combs. You have to take that. For your spears, you have access to some spear veterans and some domestici. It's up to you if you want to take them. They're pretty decent though. For your pikes, you have access to the elite Ostrogothic pikemen. These are very, very nice pikes. These are on par with the Eastern Roman Empire's Menaloitai. God damn, I am mispronouncing that so badly, guys. But yeah, over at your melee infantry, you have a couple options for melee inf. Obviously, these aren't the best options, but you have some access to veterans, which are okay, and you have some decent axes. Not the best, once again. Over at your ranged options, so you do have elite Sagatari, which are decent. Actually, these are probably your best options in terms of range, because your crossbows, your Balisari are not really good, though you do have very good skirmishers. If you want to take them, obviously you are going to have to sacrifice some units of elite Sagatari, especially if you only allow a max of 4 skirmishers, but that is dependent on you and your situation, whether you're at field battle, whether you're attacking or defending a settlement. In terms of cav, you actually have decent melee options as well as decent shock options, and you have access to a large onager, which is always great to see. Your army is going to look something like this. You're going to want to take more spears than usual just because they don't have the greatest infantry. You're going to take some pikes. You are going to grab some veterans as well as maybe 2 units of axes. I wouldn't go any more on the axes though, maybe an extra unit of veterans instead. You're going to take your 4 units of elite Sagittari, and then you're going to go down and take some melee cav as well as a shock cav. You can obviously switch this army out dependent on if it's a field battle or whether you're attacking or defending a settlement. Now we're going to go over to the much better Ostrogoths. So the Ostrogoths have a beautiful roster. They have a really good Royal Sione general. They have good spear options with the Germanic Spearmasters. They have a lot of pike options. They have basically every pike option every other faction has access to. The Ostrogoths have it, and they have their own elite Ostrogothic pikemen, which obviously are much better than anything else out there. They have amazing melee infantry with the Thracian Oldsworn. These guys have amazing armor piercing, they have good throwables, and they are just going to be amazing for you to cycle in and cycle out. They also have axes, but once again, there's no point taking these axe infantry because your melee infantry are so much better. Even if you are struggling on funds, you rather take the Thracian warriors over the Germanic warband. Over at your bows, you have very solid options. You have elite Germanic archers as well as quite a few cheaper options, and you have access to crossbows, though you're probably only going to want to take that if you are defending. Over at your slingers, you have the cheap 180 slingers, not really worth it. Skirmishers, not really worth it either. However, you have a decent cav roster, so you have some decent options for melee cav, some very solid options for shock cav, and also some nice options for skirmisher cav. And you luckily do have access to large onagers. An army is going to look something like this. And you already know it, we're going to go for a lot of Thracian Oldsworn. These guys are amazing. If you are lacking the funds, you can drop down to Thracian warriors, or if you're fighting on the walls, then you are probably going to want to go for some Gothic Palatina defectors instead, as Thracian Oldsworn need to make use of their charge bonus. As you can see, they have a 90 charge bonus. That is insane. But you have to use them, and you have to cycle these infantry in and out. If you're fighting on a wall, you're not going to be able to make use of the charge. It is better to go for some Gothic Palatina defectors instead. For your archers, you're going to want to go for elite Germanic archers unless you're defending a settlement, at which point you could swap in some crossbows instead. You're going to want to go for a unit of melee cav, maybe 2 units of melee cav as well as 2 units of shock cav, but again, you're probably going to want to switch a unit at least of this out for a extra unit of Oldsworn warriors, but for now we will just include that. Once again, this is a pretty balanced army. However, if you are attacking or defending a settlement, you may want to change this out. Maybe take a couple of cav out, add some more Thracian Oldsworn to your roster instead. Next up, we have the Picts. So the Picts have a decent roster. They have Followers of Morrigan for their general. They have a couple spear options. Again, not the best spear options, unfortunately, but you probably are going to want to take a couple units of Celtic spears. Melee options, you have much better options because you have the Black Blades as your top tier melee infantry, and you also have some decent cheap options if funds are an issue. You also have solid axes, with your Pictish axes being your best. but you are lacking once again with skirmishes. As you can see, a lot of these are more Viking, more barbarian style factions. They do lack the better skirmishes, but they make up for it with much better infantry. So you have access to Celtic bows and Celtic crossbows. Once again, you're probably not going to want to use this in a multiplayer match. You may want to instead go for some skirmishes or for some skirmisher cav. That is up to you. In terms of melee cav though, you are unfortunately lacking. You only have access to this more Maya cavalry, and you have no shock cav. You do have access to decent skirmisher cav though, and you have access to nice warhounds. You unfortunately are once again lacking any heavy artillery. So your army is going to look something like this. 2 units of spears at max. I don't think you really want to take any more just because these spears aren't that good. You're going to want to make use of your black blades though. These guys are amazing, as well as your Pictish axes. For your bows, you're probably going to want to literally just go with some infantry skirmishes or with some cav skirmishes instead. And you can take a couple units of these wolfhound spears. So these spears are probably literally better than the Celtic spears because you get to also have the warhounds, and if you use them correctly, they can be pretty deadly. But yeah, we're going to do that, and we're going to go for a couple more units of black blades as well as another unit of Pictish axes. So this is going to be what your army looks like. Next up, we're going to go over to the Roman Expedition Force. So the Roman Expedition Force is pretty interesting. They have decent spears, they have decent melee infantry. As you can see, they have the Scutatory spears, and they have the Antesignat. I cannot pronounce these names to save my life, but they have these swords, okay guys? Now where they absolutely shine is their axes. They have the amazing Bucellari? Was it Bucellari? I'm not sure. They have the Bucellari. That sounds weird. They have the Bucellari God Axemen, okay? These guys are amazing. They have amazing attack and damage, and these are going to be your bread and butter of your army. In terms of your range, you also have good options. You have the Armored Sagittari if you want, but you also have the really good Elite Ballistari, especially if you're defending. You do have access to slingers, but once again, you're probably never going to take these. Same with the skirmishes, you're just not going to want to use it. Now, being Romans, you do have solid cav options as well. You have Scout Equites, and you go all the way up to your Tagmata cavalry for melee cav. You have good shock cavalry options as well, and you have really solid horse archers. So no other Roman faction has good bows. I don't even think they have bow options, but yeah, the Roman expedition does have access to very good bow cavalry, and you have access to Imperial Dromedari as well for skirmisher cav. In terms of artillery, you have access to large onagers as well as scorpions. So an army is going to look something like this. We're going to go for that general because, well, it's the only general you can go for. For your spears, you're going to take a couple units of Scutatory spears, couple units of these Antesignani, but most is going to be these Bucellari God Axemen. These guys are amazing. These guys are going to be doing all your damage. Depending on what you are doing, if it's a field battle, you may want to go for your Armored Sagittari, or if you're attacking a settlement, you may still want to go for Armored Sagittari. Otherwise, you're going to go for Elite Ballistari. These crossbows are really, really good. For your cav, you're going to want to go for a little bit of melee cav, a little bit of shock cav, and you're going to want to go for a large onager, though you can swap that out for a scorpion if needed. Now for the last slot, depending on what you need, you can either take another cav units, whether it's melee or shock, or you can once again fill that in with another axe or another infantry unit, just depending. If you're defending a settlement, you may want to take some more infantry just so you can actually defend the walls, as these axes once again do need to make use of their charge bonus. However, if you are fighting a field battle or if you are attacking a settlement, then you may not want to use these Ballistari. Instead, once again, you may want to take out these Foederati horse archers instead. These guys are actually really good. So yeah, don't feel shy. Swap these in if you need it. The only time you want to take the crossbows pretty much is if you're defending a settlement. Next up, we have the Sassanid Empire. So the Sassanids have some of the best spears in the game, or should I say they have the best spears in the game. They have the elite immortals. You guys may remember these guys from the movie 300, but yeah, absolutely amazing spears on the Sassanid Empire. Really good general options as well. In terms of infantry, you don't have the best, but the elite Diamarsh infantry are pretty solid. Over at bows, you have amazing archers. You have the Royal Persian archers. These guys are absolutely insane, okay? They have a lot of damage, a lot of ammunition, and are going to carry you through your ranged fights. You do have decent slingers with these Armenian slingers, as well as decent skirmishers, but once again, you do not need them. Just go and take the Royal Persian archers and you are going to be fine. though the Sassanids do lack any sort of crossbows. So on defense, you are not going to be able to take crossbows. Instead, you probably will want to take these Royal Persian archers, or maybe a unit or two of skirmishers if needed. In terms of cav, you have a lot of cav options. Melee cav, you go all the way from Persian scouts all the way up to the Sogdian camel riders, so a good mix of horse-backed camels. In terms of shock cavalry, you have amazing shock cav with the Gaian Aspar. These guys are amazing. In terms of bow cavalry, you have 3 bow cav options, and these guys are really good as well. You have the Zaydan Immortal cav, you have the camels if you want camel archers, and you even have crossbow cav. So you do have crossbows, but you just don't have any crossbows that are going to be infantry units. And yeah, so these guys you may want to take, especially if it's a field battle or if you're attacking a settlement. You may want to take some of these guys, as they have amazing AP and you can run them back and forth a lot. However, you cannot use them in a defense because it just won't be as effective as taking your Royal Persian archers. Now, the Sassanids are pretty unique because they also have access to elephants. So they have the really good armored Indian elephants, and they have nav throwers. Nav throwers are a very iffy unit to use. These guys can be absolutely amazing, get a ton of kills, or just do absolutely nothing. They do throw grenades basically. It's a medieval grenade throwing unit, and the artillery is the best in the game. So while most factions have large onagers, the Sassanids have Sassanid large onagers, which are even better than the normal. They have more ammo, more range, all of that good stuff. So what will your army look like? Well, you already know. These are elite immortals, guys. There's no reason not to take them. You're going to take your 4 units of archers as well, and then you're going to take some cav. So you have Gaian Aspar. These guys are amazing. You're going to take maybe a unit or 2 of camel riders if you want, and then you're going to go over here and we're going to grab some elephants. However, you do need to be careful because in multiplayer, if you're playing 1-2-4 rules, some people may try to argue and say your elephants are ranged because they do have guys on top that can shoot bows. However, I don't think that should be an issue, and you should be allowed to take your elephants either way. Now, as you can see, we have no melee infantry yet, and that's honestly because the elite immortals are just better. Look at those stats for a spear unit. They're basically just better. However, you can take some infantry if you want. So we'll take like 2 units of them at max, and then we're gonna fill out with either some more elite immortals, or we're going to fill out with some cav. It just depends. So this army is something that I would probably take if I was attacking or defending a settlement. In terms of a field battle army, I would probably switch out maybe a unit or 2 of spears or infantry and take a few more units of cavalry. Once again, for your 4 cav units, I have Royal Persian archers here, but you guys need to decide what you want to bring based on what you're playing. If you're playing a field battle or if you're playing a siege battle, and whether you're attacking or defending in the siege, but you can swap out some of your ranged for these crossbow cav or this bow cav if needed. Once again, Sassanid Empire is a really good choice. Over at your Saxons, so the Saxons have a very solid roster. You've seen a lot of these units before in the other Viking style factions, so you're going to take this chieftain over here. You have a lot of spear options ending with your Nordic Spearmasters. You do have access to pikes with your Nordic pikes. You do have very solid infantry with your Geats being your best, or you can take some chosen warriors, and you have decent axes as well. You have Nordic Axe Warband. However, once again, as with most factions like this, you are lacking in skirmishes. So you have no good bows, you have no good slingers, and you have no crossbows at all. However, you make up for it with some very good skirmishers. You have the elite Saxon javelinmen, so you can take these instead of your archers, and I would probably recommend taking these over them in most cases. Over at your cav options, you do have quite a decent amount of melee cav, so unlike a couple others that only had 1 option, you do have some of these really nice heroic cav, and you have okay Saxon lances as well, though it's probably better just to take the heroic cavalry over them, maybe 1 unit of them at maximum. You do have access to skirmisher cav, and you can take them if you need to. Once again, you would replace your javelinmen. Javelinmen for most cases, maybe skirmisher cav if it's a field battle. You're not going to bother with warhounds because they're really bad, and you're going to take your large artillery that you do get access to. Now for the army, we're going to add in some spears, we're going to add in some pikes, and we're going to use a lot of these Geats as our main infantry, though you can take a couple of the Axe Warband if you want, and your army will look something like this. Next up, we're going to go over to the Sclavenians. So the Sclavenians are another Slavic faction, and you know what that means already. already. We don't need much of anything yet. We'll take a couple of this, sure. We'll take a couple of this, sure. We'll take some axes as well, because, you know, why not? But your main stuff are going to be the Slavic hunters. These guys, as you can see, have poison. Poison shot is amazing. You're going to take 4 units of that. You're not going to bother with their skirmishers. You're not going to bother with their skirmisher cavalry, because they simply do not outperform your Slavic hunters, okay? You do have good skirmisher cav though if you do want to take them, and you also have very solid skirmishers, but I don't see any reason for you to ever take any of that over the Slavic hunters. Now for the rest of the army, we're just going to probably get a few more axes and a couple more infantry, and your army will look something like that. Once again, you do lack any sort of melee or shock cavalry, as well as no large artillery. You're going to have to rely on these poison hunters to do most of your damage, as well as your infantry, which are pretty decent for what you get. Next up, we're going to go over to Suebi. Suebi are amazing. They have so much of good units. So for your general, you're going to take the Suebi nobles. For your spears, you have access to the Germanic spearmasters, and you also have access to the Suebi oathbreakers. Oath takers, sorry, not oath breakers. So yeah, if you look at the stats, you can see that they do have slightly different stats. One has higher attack while the other has slightly better health, etc. It's up to you which one you want to take. I would probably go for the spearmasters, but you know, these guys look pretty cool, so you could take them for that. They do have access to pikes as well, with 2 units of Germanic pikes. They have access to some of the best infantry in the game. They have the noble Suebi swordsmen, and these guys have guerrilla deployment. Where is it? No. Wait, do they not have guerrilla deployment? I swear they have guerrilla deployment. Maybe I'm making a mistake, but yeah, I am pretty sure you can guerrilla deploy these units. But yeah, you also have access to decent axes, so while most factions stop at the Germanic warband, Suebi do have the Suebi warriors, so you have much better axes than quite a few other factions. In terms of range, you're not lacking either. You have elite Germanic archers, you have Germanic crossbowmen, so if you're on defense, you can take these guys. You do have access to skirmishers and slingers, but once again, these are really bad and just not worth it. Over at your cav, you have good cav, so you have some decent melee options, you have some good shock options, with the Royal Suebi cavalry really being your go-to cav for shock. You have some skirmisher cav once again, but probably want to take your Germanic archers or crossbows instead, and you do have access to a large onager. So your army is going to look something like this. You can obviously swap these out depending on what you want, so you can take some oath takers or spearmasters, that is completely up to you, but your bread and butter is going to be the noble Suebi swordsmen. These guys are really good. You can take maybe a unit or 2 of the Suebi warriors, it's up to you. And then we're going to go for the elite Germanic archers. If you are defending, you can switch this up and bring out some Germanic crossbows instead. And for your cav, we're going to just go for 2 units of Royal Suebi cav. Next up, we're going to go over to the Tanukhids. So the Tanukhids are another desert faction. They have solid general options with Mabia's bodyguards. They have okay spears once again, with the desert spears being your best. Not really the greatest or anything, but it's worth taking a couple units. Now, Tanukhids, as you see, they have very unique pike units. They have the desert pikes, and they have the Tanukhid pikes. These pikes have really good missile block chance, which is not something you see for most pike units. Definitely worth grabbing these. Melee infantry, you have quite a few options, from your very cheap 100 gold Rebellion militia all the way up to your much better Kushite Shotalai. You're going to probably grab a couple units of these in any army you run. In terms of your ranged options, you are lacking a little bit, so you have no good slingers, but you have okay elite Nubian archers, so you can take these guys, or if you want, you can take some Badia skirmishers. These guys are pretty solid jabby units. It just depends on your use case and if you're attacking or defending a settlement or playing a field battle. Where the Tanukhids are going to shine again is with their cavalry. They have a lot of melee cav options, both camel and horse. They have a lot of shock cav options. As you can see, they have these really good sandstorm lances, but if you need cheaper options, you do have some of those, including the Clibinari, which are what the Roman factions usually get. But yeah, you're going to go for a couple of those. Your skirmisher cav are okay, but honestly not really worth taking. You're probably going to want to just go for your elite Nubian archers or your skirmishers if you need to. Unless you really want some mobile skirmishers, then you can take a couple units of that. But your army is going to look something like this. So we got our spears, we got our pikes. We're going to probably take a couple more infantry over there, and we're going to want to go for some more cavalry. And your army will look something like this. Obviously, this can change if you're fighting a field battle, maybe a few less swords, a couple more cav, or if you're defending a settlement or attacking a settlement, you can also change it out for that. Next up, we're going to go over to the Vandals. So the Vandals have a really decent roster as well. They have the Vandal Warlord for the general. You could take Germanic nobles, but it's usually just better to grab the warlord. You have solid spears with your Germanic spear masters. You have access to pikes once again, which is nice. As long as the faction has access to pikes, even if they're the cheapest pikes, they can still do some pretty good damage. They're melee infantry. They don't have the most options, but the options they have are very good. You have the noble Suebi swordsmen as your top tier infantry. These guys are going to do a lot of damage and are going to be your go-to unit for this army. You have okay axes, but once again, you're probably not going to want to use them over the noble Suebi swords unless money is an issue. But even then, you may want to go for some Vandal berserkers over the Germanic warband. As you can see, stat-wise, except for armor, the Vandal berserkers are better everywhere else. Over at your range, you have quite a few options. You have elite Germanic archers, which are really good. You can swap these out for Germanic crossbows if you're defending a settlement, or you can bring some skirmishers or slingers, but you're probably never going to want to touch these, as these guys are just not very good. Your go-to is going to be your elite Germanic archers or your crossbows if you're defending a settlement. Cav, they have a lot of cav options. They have quite a few melee cav, as you can see, with the Vandal raiders being their best. You have good shock cav as well, because you do have access to these Royal Suebi cav, and you have actual decent warhounds. So a lot of warhounds and a lot of factions are useless, but you have some good warhounds that are actually worth taking. They have a decent spear unit accompanying them, and the war dogs themselves are going to do good damage, and you have access to a large onager, which is nice. And yeah, that's going to be what your Vandal army looks like. You can obviously change it up depending on if you're attacking or defending a settlement, or if you're fighting a field battle. Next up, we're going to go over to the Venedians. The Venedians are another of the Slavic factions, and you guys already know what's going to happen. We're going to grab some chosen shields, we're going to grab some Perrin's champions, we're going to grab some axes, which they actually have better axes than quite a few of the other Slavic factions, just because most of them like stop at Perrin's axes, and these guys get Vele's chosen, which are very nice to have. But your go-to are going to be your hunters, okay? You are not going to take any other skirmisher over these. These Slavic hunters, once again, have poison shot. This is what you're going to use. You could take some normal infantry skirmishers, the Slavic nobles, or some Svarog's raiders, but once again, they're just not going to be better than taking these Slavic hunters. So your army is going to look something like this, and from here you can just adjust it depending on what you need. If you need more infantry for the walls of a settlement that you're defending, then you can take some more Perrin's champions. Otherwise, you can take some more Vele's chosen. It's up to you. For this, we'll just add 2 more units of the Perrin's champions. Next up, we're going to go over to the Visigoths. Visigoths have a very similar roster to the Ostrogoths, but without the elite Ostrogothic pikemen. Still, you have a solid general, you have good spear options, and you do have better than the the cheap Germanic pikes, as you do get access to some Gothic pikemen. Obviously, it's nowhere as good as elite Ostrogothic pikemen or the Romans Menelautoi, but they're very solid and worth taking. The melee infantry are once again where you shine. You have Thracian Oathsworn. There is no reason to take anything else except for Thracian Oathsworn unless you are defending a wall. If you're defending a wall, you may want to take some Gothic Palantina defectors instead, or if you're lacking funds, you can go for some Thracian warriors or some Germanic warbands. So you do have access to amazing infantry, you have some axes, and in terms of bows, you are also doing very solid. You have access to the elite Germanic archers. There's not much else you're going to want to need unless you are defending a settlement, in which case you can go and grab some Germanic crossbows. You also have one of the few good units of slingers in the game. So I think there was like 2 other factions that had good slingers, and the Visigoths also have good slingers with the Visigothic slingers. Once again, it's up to you whether you want to take them, though. I would normally just recommend going for the Germanic archers over the slingers if you're attacking a settlement in a field battle, or for the crossbows if you're if you're defending a settlement. They do have access to skirmishers. You're never going to want to take them. They're just not going to outperform any of your other ranged options. For cavalry, you're also pretty solid. You have some noble Germanic horsemen for your melee cav. You have decent shock cav, and you also have quite a few good skirmisher cav options, especially the Skardingi cavalry. They are very, very solid. In fact, if you are not going to take archers, crossbows, or slingers for some reason, maybe the only reason being it's a field battle, you could go for a couple units of these Skardingi cavalry, as they are really, really solid. You do have access to a large onager as well, and you're going to be taking some of those. The rest of your army, you're going to just fill it up with a few units of cav. If you're defending a settlement, you may want to swap out some of the cavalry for some more spears, or for some more melee infantry. It just depends on you. Next up, we're going to go over to the Western Roman Empire. So, the Western Roman Empire is a pretty interesting faction, okay? They have a very big, very diverse, very good roster. However, they lack pikes. They have no pikes whatsoever, but they do have some of the better spears. So you are going to grab a couple units of these spears. Yeah, I would go with for 4 units. Where they shine though is, yeah, they have so many good melee infantry options. These are not the best. Herculani Seigneurs are not going to defeat some of the very, very OP barbarian and Viking infantry going up against. For example, the Thracian Oathsworn are going to cut through these guys, no problem, but these guys are really good, and you are going to want to take a good couple units of them, as you can use them even out in the open, since they do have access to formations like stationary testudo, etc. Now, in terms of your ranged options, you have Sagittari, but these are terrible, you're never going to want to use them. You have Slingers, these are terrible, you're never going to use them. Instead, your archers are always going to be for Ravenna Elite Ballistari. These are the best crossbows in the game, and there's no reason not to take them, because, well, you don't have any better ranged options. But yeah, this is going to be where you go. You're going to take 4 units of Ravenna Elite Ballistari. Whether you're attacking a settlement, defending a settlement, or in a field battle, this is your go-to archer unit. You do have access to very good skirmishes as well with the Noble Foederati Javelins, as well as these guys, but once again, there's no reason to really take these guys over the Ravenna Elite Ballistari. These are going to be your go-to units for range. Next up, in terms of cavalry, you have very solid options. You have some nice Scarlate Palantina. You also have good Scarlate Gentiles, so it's up to you what you want to do. In terms of arty, you do have large onages, which are amazing to see, and you have access to scorpions as well. So your army is going to look something like this. Now, what you're going to change up is only dependent on your situation. If you're playing a field battle, maybe a little bit more cavalry. If you're attacking, maybe some more Herculani Seigneurs or some Elite Palantina, because these guys, unlike the Herculani Seigneurs, these guys have a much better charge bonus as well as much better attack and damage, so you guys can kind of use these as cycle charging infantry troops. But yeah, your army will look something like this. Obviously, if you're defending a settlement, you may want to reduce some of your cavalry and add in a few more infantry instead. The final faction for today's video is going to be the White Huns. The White Huns are absolutely amazing. They have brilliant infantry, they have brilliant cavalry, they are the Huns obviously. They even have access to elephants over here. These are not the armored Indian elephants that the Sassanids get, but they do have access still to Indian elephants. So, how are you going to build the White Huns? Well, very simply, your general is going to be a Kindred of the Sun. These guys are really, really good. There's no reason to take the other guys unless obviously money is an issue. Spears, you have a lot of spear options. You have the Yanda Spearmasters, which are really solid. You can use them to hold the line, no problem. And you have Chosen War Warriors. However, unlike the Huns, where these will be your go-to infantry unit most of the time, if you are using infantry, that is, these guys have access to Guardians of the Hindu Kush. These are really, really good axes. So you're probably going to want to use this if you are running a more infantry-heavy army. We won't put too many units of them for now, just because it's the White Huns. They're a cav-heavy faction, and they have amazing cavalry. They do have good bows as well with the UR archers, but once again, you just have better bow cavalry. There's no reason to take these guys as well. Now, for your cav, melee cav, as you can see, a lot of options all the way up to the knockers at 900 gold. So yeah, you guys can pick whatever you want. Probably take a couple units of knockers. Shock cab, you do have fast wave lances as well. You can take a couple of these guys. And your bow cab, you have really good options all the way up to the Avar Horde. However, you also have a much cheaper, very, very good option, and that is the Spet Zion Archers. These guys have insane missile block chance. They are so good. In fact, these are probably going to be what you want to take most of the time, okay? Like, these are going to be your 4 archer units. Yes, they're a bit cheaper than the Avar Horde, you know, but look at that. Missile damage is the same, right? Ammunition is the same, but these guys have an amazing missile block chance. So these are going to be the range that you take. Obviously, if you're in a siege battle and you're defending or attacking, possibly you can go for war archers. Obviously, it depends on your situation, but most other times you're going to go for your Spet Zion archers or some of our horde, depending. We're going to go for more cav here though, because, you know, this is a very cav heavy faction, but once again, these warrior Guardians of the Hindu Kush are so good. And we're going to go for some artillery over there. Let's just change this up a little bit, so we can get a couple units of elephants, at least 1 unit of elephant. And yeah, this is what your army will look like, okay? Obviously, this will change. If you're on a field battle, instead of this amount of infantry, you're probably going to want to drop your infantry by taking out 2 of these units of Guardians of the Hindu Kush. Maybe even remove your infantry completely if you're going full cav. But this is a more balanced army, and you can use this whether it's a field battle or a siege. Though if it's a siege battle, you may want to drop out some of this melee cavalry and You probably still want to keep the shock cav low. You do want to keep a unit to a shock cav always, so you can do some nice charges. And the Spezion archers honestly are still a very good option for you to use, but you can switch them out for UR archers if you want, or you can switch them out for some of our horde. But yeah, this is a very decent White Hun army for you to use. And yeah, that is going to be the video, guys. We have gone through every single faction in the game for the Grand Campaign. The only things we haven't gone through are if we switched to the Age of Charlemagne and the Age of Charlemagne factions. If you guys want a video on that, we can obviously do that as well. But otherwise, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and if you have any questions at all about any specific faction, or if you want me to elaborate on anything, I can do that as well. I was trying to be pretty quick with every faction, okay? I did try to go through, you know, just mention what they had in terms of roster, you know, whether they had spears, whether they had good infantry, you know, if they lacked any crossbows or axes or, you know, large artillery, etc. But if you guys want a more in-depth guide on any specific faction, let me know down below in the comment section, because I can do that, okay? If you want a nice in-depth, like 10-15 minute video on every single faction, we could get that done, okay? We could definitely get that done. We'll spend 15 minutes per faction, you know, maybe 10 minutes per faction. We will go through every single individual spear unit, every single individual melee, axe, bow, cav unit that they have. We'll go onto the Attila wiki as well. We will show you guys, you know, the stats that aren't shown. So here it shows most stats, but for example, it doesn't show missile block chance. It just tells you it has excellent missile block chance. So we will go through and do the deep dive into absolutely everything if needed. Otherwise, this guide should hopefully serve you pretty well. Anyways, if you guys did enjoy, please do drop a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on those post notifications. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Konnichiwa.